Topic of the moment is Clarity jobs. Jobs are basically executable files that can be used to do a wide variety of things. There are a small number of them that are defined by the system when you install Clarity. There are a couple that we've written internally, and there's really not a lot to say about them. Creating jobs is extremely complex, requires Java coding or database stored procedures or other things that are beyond my scope. I understand them, but I don't write them. So let me just give you a quick overview of how we use them. Under the home menu, we've got reports and jobs, and there are two tabs. These are all the reports in the system, and the other tab is for jobs. So I'm just going to kind of run through them. There's only 3 pages of them. A lot of them are kind of outside the scope of what we need to worry about. But just to give you a bit of a flavor of what's there, I'll just do a quick review. Assigning incidents, we don't use incidents in Clarity. That's like you could use Clarity as a help desk tracker. And if someone raises a ticket, you can assign it to someone with this job, or you can assign a whole batch of incidents to one person. Auto scheduling a project. This is better done in Microsoft Project, but if you're using Clarity to set up the work breakdown structure and the task dependencies for your project, you can make a bunch of changes. You can set Clarity to not auto schedule, and then when you're ready to auto schedule a project, you would run this job against that project, and that will implement all of the changes that you've made and give you the new schedule. Batch printing is for printing invoices. We don't use invoices in Clarity. Clean user session, I don't know any more about this than what the description says. It is a system maintenance job, and I would recommend being careful before you use it because I'm not entirely sure what it will do. It sounds pretty innocent, but I have never had occasion to need it. Content add-in installer, there are certain add-in modules like the PMO Accelerator Pack that can be added to Clarity. There's one for running Prince2 projects, one for new product development. If we need any of those, there's a job that installs them and only needs to be done once. Content Packager, I really have no idea what this does. Copy cost plan of record, you can read this description. I'm not sure when you would ever need to do this, but this is an out-of-the-box job that will let you update your cost and budget plans per the description. Create and update Jaspersoft users. This one, we're not using Jaspersoft yet because we're still on 14.3 and it's still not working properly, but this one and create business objects users are similar. We are using business object reports. In order for a user to receive any data back from a report, even though they have permission to run the report, they have permission to view the data that the report is pulling, they can't see anything in the report itself unless they are a business object user. There's a separate server on the server end of Clarity for running reports. So even though someone is a user on the application server, they can use the Clarity application, and they are a user on the database server, they can access the database, they may not be a user on the report server. So this job basically goes through, and everybody that's a Clarity user, it makes sure that they are also a report server user. So not a bad thing to run this periodically, and if you get a complaint that someone can't see data from a report, first thing is to check their permissions. Next thing is to run this job. Datamart extraction and Datamart rollup. There are a number of things in Clarity that are so complex that if you built a portlet or a screen in the system that you land on that screen or that portlet and it displays that data, it would take a long time to construct the view and show it to you. So you would be sitting there waiting for the page to refresh for several minutes. So in order to speed up the system, there is a lot of material that is pulled automatically into a data mart and kept available so that when you land on one of those pages, instead of reading all the raw data out of the tables in the database, it reads a pre-constructed view of that data in the data mart. As a result, the data mart extraction pulls the data out of the database, and then the roll-up puts it all together into a view that then can pop up on your screen fairly quickly. So these two jobs should be done in succession, do the extraction, then do the roll-up on a frequent basis. And indeed, we have them scheduled. If I go up here to the Jobs tab and look at scheduled jobs, or I look at the log, I should be able to see that I've got, this is in alphabetical order, but let me go to the log. Should be able to see data mart extraction and roll up is occurring regularly, and I believe we've got it set to be, what is it, every hour? Yeah, I think it's once an hour. So 10, 11, 12, 1. Once an hour this job runs, and that's pretty good frequency, so I would just leave it at that. If that job ever stops running, people are going to complain that they can't see their changes when they go to certain pages, and you'll need to go back in and schedule it to run regularly. Delete investments deletes any projects or ideas or applications or anything that is marked for deletion. So on the project list page, there's no delete button, but there's a mark for deletion or mark for delete. So if you mark a project or an investment object that way, this is the job that actually then gets them out of the system. So again, this should probably be run at least weekly, maybe even daily. And if in doubt, you can always run it. And as long as somebody didn't inadvertently mark something for deletion, you're not going to have any adverse effects from running it. Deleting log analysis is just a maintenance thing. I don't think I've ever actually run this, but log files can get big over time, and it's probably a good idea to go ahead and do this once in a while. My suspicion is that CA does this as part of their routine maintenance, so I've never had to run it. Deleting a process instance. This is a very, very useful job. It lets you delete all instances of a project. And I covered this in the video on complex processes, so I'm not going to say too much more about it here, except that it's perfectly okay to run this. It doesn't hurt anything, and it's a good idea to do this once in a while, because some of our processes run frequently, and we end up with massive numbers of them just sitting there in the system. So they just take up space and slow things down. Next one, I have no idea what this does. Execute a process is a good example of the power of clarity. You can write a workflow, a process that isn't associated with a specific object, and then whenever you want, you can run it by doing an execute process. So one of the primary uses for this is to build a process that zogs in a data file, and then to schedule execute a process to run on a periodic basis. This is one of the mechanisms for establishing an integration between Clarity and other systems. So the way that we've used it, we've got one use of this. The update tier saved version of this executes the process AZ update calculated project tier. So projects are assigned to tier 1 through 5 based on their planned cost. And if I look over here at processes and look at this update calculated project here, and I go to my step update the calculated tier, there is a script that goes through and analyzes, and based on the value of the project, it assigns it to tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or otherwise it defaults to 6, and then it constructs a Zog XML file right in this shell script, and ultimately zogs that into Clarity and captures any errors. So this process will look at every project in the system, and based on its planned cost, set the tier. And because people can modify the planned cost, we have a job that runs periodically that updates the calculated project tier. This particular one used to be set recurring. I don't see any recurrence here, so apparently this is no longer being done automatically. Oh, actually, this is development. It may be being done in production on a regular basis. So that might be something to look at if you're interested. It should have a recurrence here. If you want to run a job immediately, that's the default. You click submit and it runs. If you want to schedule it, you can either schedule it and run it immediately, or you can just run it when it's scheduled. And you can give it a start date. That's the point at which it will look at this schedule and decide when to run it. So you can schedule it to run weekly, but not start until next month by putting a start date. And then setting the recurrence, it's fairly straightforward. You can do it weekly or monthly by selecting the appropriate parameters. Or if you're a show-off, you can use Unix cron tab entry format, which is my way of doing it, much more flexible, much more precise. You can have it run at an exact time of day, which is really what you want to do. So I generally use the Unix cron tab entry format for scheduled jobs that need to recur. That way you can schedule them to run at like 4 in the morning or something. So running short on time, let me continue. Generate invoices we don't use because we don't generate invoices. Indexing contents and documents for searches. The Clarity search feature is about the worst feature in the whole tool. So I don't recommend you even look at it, much less use it, and therefore this job's pretty meaningless. Integration data loader, this sounds really cool. I don't know anything about it, haven't used it, but it might bear some investigation. Investment allocation, if you set up a portfolio, oh, sorry, no, I'm ahead of myself. The investment allocation is going to synchronize investment time sliced values. And I haven't talked about time slices in this video, so I'm going to kind of move on from this one. Post-incident financials, again, incidents we don't use. Post timesheets is a necessary one. Whenever you have a timesheet, it gets submitted, it gets approved, and then it has to be posted. So we currently have this job set to run every Wednesday morning at like 3 in the morning. So timesheets from 1 week are due by Friday. Managers have Monday and Tuesday to review and approve them. And every Wednesday, any approved timesheets get posted into the system. Post to WIP is for financial transactions. We're not using it. Same with the next one. The next few, purging, this is just a way of getting rid of stuff that's old and no longer needed. And again, it's system maintenance. Don't need to worry too much about it, but okay to run them if you want. Rate matrix extraction is needed. I'll touch on this again when I talk about rate matrices, but if you update the matrix, you have to extract it in order to make that information available. So you have to run that job. Anytime you change the rate matrix, you then need to go and run this job. Let's see, anything else I've critically got to hit here? Synchronized portfolio investments, that's what I thought I was on here. On a portfolio, you can hit the synchronize button and it will update it based on changes to the investments that are included in that portfolio. This job just does that for every portfolio. So if you want to do it across the board, this is useful. Time slicing, this job gets run frequently and it updates time slices. So this should be a scheduled job in the system, and indeed it is on ours. Tomcat access, you don't need to worry about this as server-side maintenance. And the last two are, and indeed much of the ones on the next page, are things that are project specific and have to deal with parameters of a project that we're not really currently using. But I can't really say too much more about any of these other than if you start using earned value in earnest, you can go in and look at these. Update estimates from allocation. Don't run this, it messes with the project, and this has gotten us into trouble in the past. So bottom line, this is the way jobs work. This is where you find them. And if you don't know anything about it, don't run it. Go look at the CA documentation. And now that you know everything about jobs, be very careful.